Hi there, it's Ed, and today I will be looking at the Universal World Profile by Zozer Games. Yeah, I mentioned that I used this in my last Solo Traveler video when I talked about expanding out the system of Zorazia, where Anselm was headed, and I had a couple of people say, yes, we'd like to see some more information about that resource, so that's what this video is going to be about. I learned about Zozer Games actually when I was randomly rolling up my subsector for my Solo Traveler adventures. I'll put a link to that video somewhere around here. You can check that out if you have not seen that yet. And actually I found this right at the perfect time because, like I say, I was creating the subsector and I found this book. This book goes further in depth into the Universal World Profile, what those numbers might mean, and how you might put them together to spur your imagination and creativity when you're deciding the different characteristics of the planet, the inhabited planets, is what I'm trying to say, in your subsector. This is written by Paul Elliott, and I think Paul Elliott may be a one-person operation. I think he might be the entirety of Zozer Games. If that's wrong, please, Paul, correct me. But yeah, this is by Paul Elliott. Paul is quite prolific. He has several books through Zozer Games, all kinds of different aspects about Traveler and Cepheus system and a wide variety of things like that. Anyway, without further ado, let's find out what is inside the Universal World Profile. And here we have the Universal World Profile by Zozer Games. Cepheus engine. Fancy, all right. Let's check this out. Start off with an introduction, talking about the use of the book and exactly why it was written, and sort of the design philosophy they have using the stuff they present in the book. Then we start. Personally, I think this is worth the price of the book right here. Star systems. This goes through the entire process of generating what else is in your star system or your planetary system where your inhabited planet is going to be. So things like, what other planetary bodies do you have in this star system? Do you have more than one star? Is it a binary or a trinary system? And if so, where are those located? Your main world, where is that located? What orbit around your main star? Do you find your main world? Gas giants. How many do you have and where are they located? Planetoid belts. And what other planets may be present in your system. This was extremely valuable, and this is the main part I used, like I said, when I was developing the Zorazian system for my Solo Traveler adventure. This was the part I used to see what else was in Zorazia, because determining on Mythic, I knew that the spaceship was not crashed on Zorazia itself, and I needed to know what other planets, what other sort of planetary bodies might be in that system, and this helped me figure it all out by rolling it randomly, much like you would generating the system in the Traveler or the Cepheus system rule. So yeah, this was hugely valuable, and again, I think this is almost worth the price of the book by itself. But there's plenty more book to go through, so let's go through here. Then we talk about the basic Universal World Profile here, what each number means, what it would look like when it's all written out, what each one of those different notations would mean, and jump right into size. Now, I thought this was really good because it talked about size in relation to planetary density. Of course, you have the table both in Cepheus and Traveler, how big the world is, and what kind of gravity it has, which is really handy when you're deciding on information about your world and trying to visualize your world. But this goes into what is the density of the world, and why is that important? Well, it might give you an idea of how abundant is metal on your planet, what would be the gravitational pull, and how does that affect native life, but also colonists. If you've been there for 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, a planet with a low density that has less gravity, you would tend to have people who are taller and thinner. If you have a high-density world with a lot more gravity, you have shorter, stockier people. Can give you an idea of how to visualize the people who have been on that planet for a while. What do they look like? And that, in addition to atmosphere, can give you an idea about what sort of animals you do find. Are they low to the ground? Are they, very short, long, thin? Or do you have a lot of flying animals? So the gravity, the density will help you determine that. Also, have a whole section about volcanism, how seismically active is your world. The density can help you determine that. Also a big chunk about rotation, axial tilt, and eccentricity. So does your planet rotate? What's the relation, I guess, between the axial tilt of your planet and how much tilt does it have as the seasons go on, how quickly does it rotate, how quickly does it go around the star, how do those affect the season. So a lot of great information about that. And this is the habitation part where they talk about, what are the life forms going to look like after a few generations? What are the colonists going to look like? A low-G world flight's going to be a lot easier, so you may have a higher frequency of flying creatures, flying life forms on a low G world rather than a very high G world. They'll talk a little bit about this when they talk about atmosphere, which is coming up next. Anyway, great overview about the size of the planet. And actually, what does that mean? I mean, you see the size, and I never really considered how the density would affect, can you mine there? Do you find iron? Do you find other metals? Then we talk about the atmosphere again. What kind of atmosphere is it? Is it thin? Is it tainted? Is it dense? What's the atmospheric pressure? And what kind of survival gear you might need? This is, again, found in Cepheus and Traveler. But again, it goes into much more depth about what do these numbers mean. Things, again, like if you do have a high density world and a thin atmosphere, what does that mean to the people and the life forms you're going to find there? What kind of life can thrive on that world? Conversely, if you have, a thick atmosphere and sort of a low density, which you're probably not going to get that too much simply because size is a factor in when you're rolling up atmosphere. But what does that look like when you have people there? Also talks about if you have a very thin atmosphere, might change the humidity levels. So the air will be very, very dry. What does that mean? Well, that means that animals and people and colonists are going to have to drink a lot more water to survive. And if you have maybe a very dry world, it's a very arid world, well, they're going to be importing water. And that gives you an idea of, again, what is this world? What do they need? What are they using? What are they actually importing? What do they have to bring in maybe they don't have on their own? But anyway, great information about how the atmosphere can go along with the density, how that might affect colonists. Airless worlds, what does the tainted mean? And also extreme atmospheres, which would be the exotic, corrosive, insidious, and goes into a lot of description about what these different elements might mean, depending on what element is predominant, or most prevalent, I should say, in the atmosphere. What is that going to mean? Like carbon dioxide. If you have a lot of carbon dioxide, what does that mean? It could be insidious. If you have, it says here, high pressure and high temperature, this type of carbon dioxide atmosphere is insidious, right? That it means it breaks down your protection over time. So yeah, it tells you exactly how that would happen. Oxygen, if you have a high oxygen content, that could be exotic or corrosive, depending on how thick the atmosphere is and what kind of atmosphere it is. All right. So hydrogen also talks about what if you have a high methane atmosphere, sulfur, ammonia, chlorine, fluorine, and a high temperature. So how does that affect it? And also, how does that affect the climate of the world? So again, you have little building blocks, little pieces of information from the size, from the atmosphere, put them together to see what kind of life may thrive or what colonists may have to do to thrive on a planet like that. Then we go to hydrographics, which is, of course, how much water we have on a world, with the standard table. And they kind of group it into, I should say he kind of groups it into general large categories. Dry worlds, something between 0 and 3. Again, doesn't necessarily mean a desert world. It could be a world with very little standing water, and it doesn't mean like sandy wastes like Tatooine. It could be a rocky world. It could be, barren rocky plains with perhaps one major Nile-like river they talk about in here. So what kind of culture does that give rise to? Wet worlds, which Earth would be considered a wet world using these guidelines, and also a water world. What does that mean? He talks about Camino in the Star Wars universe and a few other things. What does it mean if you have primarily no dry land? Does that mean absolutely no dry land? Well, he says no. It could be like small little sandbanks or coral reefs or volcanic island chains. There actually may be some dry land where a starship could land, or there could be some dry land where life other than like sea life could thrive. So anyway, good overview of what does it mean to have a hydrographics, a water world. Our population. So the first part of the book is all about the physical stats of the world. Now we're getting more into the social stats. Anyway, it talks again about low population worlds. What do they need? What does that mean? What is a high population world? How does that affect the world? and again, your population modifier. Then it talks about the government. I like this because, I kind of know what these mean when I see it listed out in this table, but he does a great job going much more in depth, talking about what each of these governments actually means. How does the government set up, and what does it mean for those who are underneath this government? So things like if your government is the corporation, if it's a self-perpetuating oligarchy. Captive government goes into a lot of description about, okay, what happened? Why are they captive? Was it an invasion? Were the people who were in charge invited in? Exactly, a lot of things to think about as you're deciding what was the government, why is the government now captive, who is actually the people that are in charge, where are they, information like that. So a good thing to think about as you're coming up with details about your world. A civil service bureaucracy, all the different ones. Charismatic dictator between a non-charismatic dictator. What do those different things mean? And what would it mean for the government? And more importantly, your characters when they visit a planet that has this government. A charismatic oligarchy and a religious dictatorship. And a lovely picture of Singapore. No comment on that. Then we go to the law level. This, again, breaks it down, not specific by, law level 1, law level 2, but what does it mean? First, you have no law. What does it mean if you have a law level of 0? Then a low law world. What does that mean for the populace? Moderate law, high law, and extreme law. It does give a little bit of real-world Earth examples of this country at this period of time in history, that would be a moderate law, or maybe it's a high law, things like that. Extreme law is almost, do we have, I don't know, we might. Anyway, getting off on a tangent. Anyway, so tells you a little bit about, what do these different law levels mean? How does that affect the people that live there? And again, how is that going to affect your characters when they visit the government with this kind of law level? Then we go to technology level. Now, I have to admit, technology level is one of those things that, strangely enough, has always kind of mystified me. I've had a hard time figuring out exactly what tech level means, but something that he makes point to mention here, which I found really helpful, he says the biggest danger is looking at TL5, seeing that it represents 1900 to 1939 technology, and then assuming that life on Planet X must be similar to 1920s America or Edwardian England, with all the cultural and social baggage that comes with it. And I think that's how I was thinking of a lot of the tech levels. When I saw that it was 1900 to 1939, I had an idea of what that tech level was, but I was also thinking that meant something culturally, and it doesn't. It's not, the two are not necessarily, there's no correlation between the two is what I'm trying to say unsuccessfully. So, that just gives you an idea of what tech level most people are dealing with. Something also that he talks about and that I have found helpful thinking about tech level is that the tech level is just kind of the median. There are some areas that maybe are a few tech levels lower. There are a few areas that maybe are a few tech levels higher. Maybe they merge. It's not a hard and fast number. And I think that's one of the things that I always thought. It's like, it's 1939, nothing beyond that. Which I was like, well, if they're 1900 to 1939 and they have spaceships visiting regularly, I don't see how they can still at tech level 5. But anyway, that's just, again, that was just my own personal hang up about tech level. So goes very much into each specific tech level from the Stone Age all the way up to High Stellar and beyond, and exactly what sort of technology would you find in that tech level. What is the pinnacle of communications technology, weapons technology, defense technology, military type things like that. And the progression through. So again, don't think about 1939 and 1969 as anything cultural, just exactly what kind of tech is available to the general populace at that point. Some people have said that's what people can produce locally. I don't find that very helpful for me in my imagination, figuring out exactly what they have. But considering this, generally speaking, this is what people have access to. Some would be a little lower, maybe down to TL4. Some might be all the way up to TL7 or 8. But generally speaking, TL6 is what you're going to find. And of course, if there's a starport on the planet, I would say the closer you are to the starport, the higher tech level you would actually encounter. But you probably knew that already. All right. A lot of information about tech level, which I really appreciated. Go to the starports, a really detailed description of what you're going to find in each starport. Are they going to have a shipyard? Are they going to have bases? Can you get maintenance? Can you get fuel? What sort of facilities do they have available for all the different starports? But a lot of information about that. Also, starports as plot, which is something that I found interesting just to read about how to use the starport as a plot point in your adventure. and trade classifications. This is something that I know is in Cepheus system. It's not in the Old Traveler book, but I really appreciate this, and I found this really informative when it came to deciding information and statistics and a way to imagine my world, what the world is like. Now, of course, you read this, it just says agricultural, asteroid barren, gives you an idea, but again, this book goes into a lot more detail. What do those things mean? So an agricultural world, what does it mean to be an agricultural world? Well, they produce all the food they need, and they produce a lot of excess, which they can then take off planet and sell to other places. So yeah, what are they exporting? Well, obviously food. What does it mean to have a fluid ocean? What does it mean to be a low population or industrial planet? Again, I think a lot of times in these classifications, I was thinking very rigid. Industrial, they make things. Agricultural, they grow things. It's maybe not as hard-edged as that, as I was trying to make it. But yeah, what will they need? If you have a low technology planet, what are they going to need to import? If you have an agricultural planet, what are they going to import? And they all have different needs, and how you might be able to balance those when it comes to trade. And of course, this is all about adventure opportunities, right? And as we know, Traveler Cepheus, a big part of the adventure is commerce, bringing goods, taking goods out, buying low, selling high. That is a big part of the game. So this really helps visualize what are the different trade classifications wanting and what can they export. All right, then we go into, flipped a little too far. We go to bases. Variety of bases, and again, a further description of what you'll find at the different bases, like naval bases, scout bases, pirate bases, and where you might find those, and an idea of what the codes are going to be. Travel zones, talks a little bit about an amber zone, talks quite a bit about a red zone. Another thing that I appreciated about this, not just there are red zones, pretty much the advice in the Traveler book is boiled down to, and some places are red zones. You're welcome. This goes into a lot more information about what is a red zone, and also how does the government, whether it's the local government or the Imperium, how do they keep you away from a red zone? What various levels of security you might find to keep you out of a red zone, because a red zone's not a red zone or a red zone. There are different ways. It might be a regular patrol. It might be spy security satellites. It might be a patrol that is permanently in orbit around the planet. Red zones are not all created equal. That's kind of what I learned from this. It was a great description of those and how you might think of the different zones. Interstellar governments, talked about a little bit. Communication and trade routes, a little bit of information about that. And then we go into the process. So this is how they take the information that you gleaned from this book and how you take all that information and smash it together and come up with an original world that has a certain amount of logic to it. It'll stand up from scrutiny. So first of all, he takes the physical stats, which would be, the size, the atmosphere, and the hydrographics. How do those fit together and what do they mean? Then the social stats, the population, the government, the law level, the tech level, and what kind of starport they have. And what do those mean together? Taking those two groups and then putting them together. So linking the physical and social stats. So quite a bit of information about that. And then he goes through 3 planets that he's randomly generated and talks about how he takes the physical stats, the social stats, what do they mean individually, and then putting them together, what does it mean for the planet. I have to say, this was really helpful. I would have liked to have seen a bit more in this example section. I could have had another page about this. Some of the leaps that he makes and some of the stuff that he comes up with, I had a hard time seeing where he came up with that. I mean, and it's all imagination, and he just sort of was inspired by what he found in the physical and the social stats. I would have liked to have seen this expanded a little bit more. Now, they do have some products. Zozer Games has a few world profiles where they have gone through the process and fully fleshed out worlds. If you want to do that, I'm sure they'd be happy for you to buy those from them. And I would say go ahead and do it if you feel that would be beneficial for you. And after that, he also talks about the hook. So he says in here that a lot of times taking the physical stats, taking the social stats, and putting them together, you still don't have a great idea of what is this planet about, what is unique about this planet, what's interesting about this planet, and that's where you think of the hook. What is the hook of your world? Is there a specific something unique about this world, like maybe an ice world, maybe a desert world, maybe a water world, or maybe it's something like this is a prison planet. This is a place where there's an ancient site and there are ruins and artifacts around. Can you take a hook, something we find here on Earth, a specific type of geography or a certain geographical formation or something like that and put it in a planet, can that be a hook for a planet? So it talks a lot about how to do that. Again, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of all of this. I could have had this example, the how to do it part, the process. I could have had, probably about 10 more pages going more into that, but that's me. And of course, at the very end, we do have a lovely map with the subsector name and all the hexes for you to create a subsector of your very own. And there we have it. So here's the question. Would I recommend this book? Yes, actually I would, with a little bit of a caveat. I think this is a great resource if you do want to expand the information you have about the worlds you've created. If you're sort of stumped on what the different things mean, how does size relate to atmosphere, to population, what exactly these trade codes mean, I think this is a great resource to help expand on those, and taking those different pieces of information can really spur your creativity in creating a unique and rather living and, what am I trying to say, not necessarily scientifically accurate, but give your word a certain verisimilitude. So I think that's very handy for that if you're looking to expand some information about the different planets. However, I would resist the temptation to use this for every single world in your subsector. I think that might be going a little too far. It's like when you create a fantasy campaign. A lot of people want to go in and create detailed histories and lineages of the royal families and histories. I've said that already. Huge amounts of information and background in every single little village and who is in charge and what the monetary policy is like and things. That's too much. You can really, really go too far in that kind of thing, which can impede your actually using that kind of setting in an actual game. I think the same thing with the Universal World Profile. I think it's a great resource, but I think it could take you a little too far down in the weeds if you tried to use it for every single planet in your subsector before you started playing. Once you start playing, much like I did, I wanted to know more about the system of Zorazia because I knew that crashed ship with the artifact or the mind control device that was somewhere in that system. So this was a great resource to help me expand more in the system and more about what might be there besides just the inhabited planet of Zorazia. In that situation, yeah, I definitely would use this, but maybe not for every single planet in your subsector. So, all that being said, yes, I do recommend Universal World Profile by Zozer Games. Pick this up. It is in PDF and, of course, in a printed form. And this is just me, but the fact that this is printed on, whatever this size is, A5 paper, it's a little bigger than sort of one we find in the U.S. I think Paul is from the U.K., so yeah, I just like the size of it. It looks nice on a shelf. There will be another Solo Traveler video coming up in the very near future, I think possibly as soon as next week. So be on the lookout for that. Until then, I will see you next time.